Hello friends, in the previous video we had seen that in 1955 Imperial Bank of India was nationalized and its name was changed to State Bank of India. In this way, India got its first public sector bank, and all this was done by SBI Act of 1955. After this, in 1959, SBI Subsidiary Banks Act 1959 was passed, through which such banks were nationalized which were the most popular banks of different princely states before independence. These banks were nationalized and made associate banks of SBI so that SBI can now reach more regions than before. So now after the joining of these associate banks in SBI, the reach of SBI had increased a lot. But if we look at the overall banking sectors, the situation was still that the majority of the banking sector was being dominated by the private sector banks. And the problem was that these private sector banks always neglected the unprofitable and risky sectors such as agriculture and small scale industries. That is why the government had now realized that nationalizing one or two banks would no longer work. Now nationalization would have to be done on a mass scale. And that is why in 1969 the Parliament passed a law which was named the Banking Nationalisation Act. Through this act, 14 banks were nationalized. At that time, 85% of India's banking business was handled by these banks. After this, in 1980, the Parliament passed another act which was named Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Act. Through this act, the Government of India acquired 6 more banks. And in this way, the banking sector became 100% nationalized by 1980. So we saw that from 1947 to 1980, the entire focus of the Government of India was on nationalizing the banking sector. And through this nationalization, the Government of India had promoted financial inclusion. Banking services were extended to rural areas. This nationalization also benefited the priority sectors of India, such as small-scale industries and agriculture. And because the people of India had trust in the Government of India, more and more people opened their bank accounts in the government banks. And due to this, many people were able to connect with the banking sector. So we can see that through the nationalization program, the Indian government had achieved many objectives. But in the late 80s and early 90s, India's economic situation was continuously declining. High inflation, large fiscal deficit, balance of payment crisis, stagnant economy. India was going through a big economic crisis. And this economic crisis was not just related to the banking sector, but was related to the entire financial system. That is why a committee was set up in 1991, that is Committee on Financial System. This committee is also called CFS. The chairman of this committee was Madhavolu Narasimhan. Madhavolu Narasimhan was also the governor of Reserve Bank of India for a few months in 1977. In his name, this committee is also called Narasimhan Committee First. Narasimhan Committee First because he chaired 2 committees. The first committee was the Committee on Financial System, which was created in 1991, and the second committee was the Committee on Banking Sector Reforms, which was created in 1998. This is the reason why the Committee on Financial System is called Narasimhan Committee First, and the Committee on Banking Sector Reforms is called Narasimhan Committee Second. So now if we talk about Narasimhan Committee first, it was given the task to examine all the aspects of the Indian financial system. One of these aspects was also the banking sector. The expectation from the Narasimhan Committee first was that after examining all the aspects of the Indian financial system, it would recommend in its report how the Indian financial system could be reformed and modernized. On the basis of these recommendations, the Indian financial system was restructured. So in this discussion till now, we have seen that Indian financial system was reformed on the basis of recommendations of Narasimhan Committee first. But along with this, we should also know that in 1991, LPG reforms had started in India. LPG, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. The scope of LPG reforms was much wider. And these financial sector reforms can be seen as a part of LPG reforms because whatever reforms were done in the financial sector on the basis of the recommendations of the Narasimhan Committee were a part of the LPG reforms on a wider scale, which had restructured our entire economy in one way. Due to these reforms, the role of the government in the Indian economy had also fundamentally changed. This change was so big that you can draw a straight line in front of 1991 and see what was the role of the government of India in our economy before 1991 and what happened after 1991. Before 1991, the government of India was engaged in nationalizing all the key industries of India, be it banking, insurance, or heavy manufacturing. The government was playing a dominant role in directing the economic policies of our country. Kind of government had a monopoly on all the key industries. Private participation was very limited and heavily regulated. And this is because the government of India had created a very complex systems for licensing, permits and control of these industries. But after 1991, the approach of the government changed fundamentally. The government left its interventionist policies and shifted towards a market oriented approach. That is, now the government did not want to keep everything under its control. Due to this, the private sector players got a lot of push and greater private sector participation was seen. So we saw that since 1991, the government was not thinking about further nationalization but about privatization. But what impact it had on the banking system is yet to be known because the Committee on Financial System had given many recommendations in its financial sector reforms. So in the next video, we will cover the recommendations that the Committee on Financial System gave to reform the banking sectors. To cover Indian history and Indian economy in detail, follow Bookstawa playlist. Link is given in the description box. Thank you so much for watching and supporting Bookstawa.